If I could just return briefly to the question of managing risk between different providers, and Mr. Bryan touched on this very early on. Just one specific question. Do you think there is potential for a conflict of interest almost with the idea that another provider who is managing the risk of an offender may be reluctant to pass them back to the public sector probation service, because presumably they would lose money? And I'm curious as if there's a conflict of interest potential there and how it may be managed.
I think it's more likely to be the other way around. I mean, the approach we're going to take we're asking questions in the consultation about exactly what the pricing mechanism should be, how we avoid creaming and parking, and so forth, which we'll come back to. We're definitely quite open-minded about some of the detail around that. But the one thing I think we have to do in this is to adopt a cohort-based approach in the way we have in Peterborough to the payment system. So the way that the Peterborough system is working is that, for every 1,000 people who are referred to the provider organisations, after a period of time, we work out what the reoffending rate in that group has been after they've been through the process compared with what it was before, and the payment is based on the performance of that cohort. It won't be done on the basis of an individual. It would be impossible to do it on the basis of an individual. Now, there are two issues here. One is the incentives to move somebody one way or the other. I mean, the truth is, if you think they're going to reoffend and you try and keep them to yourself, that doesn't really help your figures. In many ways, I'm be more worried there's an intent if somebody's a problem to move them off the books back into the public sector. And we've got to be very clear. We already have protocols for risk management. Risk management isn't just done, with a finger in the air. There's actually systems in place which probation officers use to assess risk and decide whether to categorise somebody as high, medium or low. And we've clearly got to continue to have that. And decisions about recategorising people have got to be done in a proper structured way. But I don't think the provider will have an incentive to try and keep back somebody they think might reoffend. Just the opposite, actually.
Mr. Johnson.
If I could actually, Secretary of State, please build on what you've been saying there about the pricing mechanisms and how that needs to work in a robust marketplace. Whilst I think it's absolutely sensible to have a system whereby there is payment by results, in many ways the devil will be in the detail, will it not? If, for example, you take a prolific burglar and the organisation that takes over control of that person's rehabilitation is able to stop that person burgling, but they go out and shoplift, for example. What category do they go into? Do road traffic offences categorise it, or breaches of court orders? All these kind of minutiae detail, which will have to be worked out with these organisations in advance to make sure that they're content with bidding for these contracts. Do you agree with me that that's a real challenge for your department in getting that right, so that it's worthwhile for organisations to bid for these contracts and that they actually do reward those who are genuinely successful?
I mean, what we mustn't do is make it too complicated, but I'm very clear. I don't believe that you can actually, it's one of the questions we're asking and we'll see what people say, but I'm starting from the view that there had to be some kind of structured system. What we did with the work programme was had 3 or 4 categories of measuring harder to help, and the payment rose for the harder to help group. Now, we're not doing this by individual, but it may be that we want to categorise a particular group of offenders and say, as a subset of the total, if you reduce reoffending amongst this lot, we pay more. That's certainly one of the options to look at. I mean, there is a debate about a binary measure or a non-binary measure. And in many ways, it's quite similar to the discussion I had with providers in the run-up to the launch of the work programme. They all said, well, okay, if we move people further down the road towards work, but don't actually get them a job, will you pay us because that's progress? To which my answer then was, well, no, because I actually want them to get into a job, and that's what I'm paying you for. The question is this, okay, so if we've got a prolific burglar who used to burgle 10 houses a week, and we get down to having them burgling 5 houses a week, is that progress we want to pay for? And I think my answer to that is still, well, no. I want them to be got back on the straight and narrow so they're burgling not at all. The issue is, though, how we provide an incentive to make sure that the providers are working with the more prolific offenders, and there is a financial incentive to do so. What I don't want is the creaming and parking of more problematic people. We've got that very much in mind as we consider the pricing structure, and I don't intend to have a situation where there's an obvious incentive to cream and park.
And the pilots that are going on at the moment, how do you assess their progress so far? Do you think they've been successful, generally speaking, or are there issues that have been identified?
Well, I have to give you the non-statistical answer because I haven't got statistics that give me kind of a final picture of them. What I know is that if I look at Peterborough, the teams delivering and the investors backing them seem to be pretty happy with progress. What I'm seeing happening and talking to the people that participate in the programmes is giving me a sense that it is positive. So my expectation is that we will see positive outcomes in Peterborough. But what we're not going to see is some dramatic falling off a cliff of reoffending levels. What we are trying to see, and there will be ups and downs in what we do as well, but what we're trying to do over time is no trend line ever goes straight. It always goes like that. So, you'll have bad months and good months and so forth. But what my expectation is that, we will over time, with a greater focus on mentoring and supporting offenders, where they bring in the under 12-month people, with a greater focus on rehabilitation at the community sentence level as well, we will see step-by-step drops in reoffending levels. That's what we're trying to achieve. It's what we all want. And I think it's actually what, in that previous report, what you were suggesting could be achieved.